Hi, this is Heather. I opted to do my presentation on anchored instruction, as you can see, because I thought that when we were reading about it in the textbook, it seemed really interesting and I wanted to know more about it. So this is what I've learned about anchored instruction. It was developed collaboratively by a group called CTGV, which sounds to me kind of like a French bullet train, but it's actually the Cognition and Technology Group at Vanderbilt University. This group was in operation during the 90s, and its most often cited member is John Bransford. His name's usually connected with anchored instruction. Anchored instruction is connected with situated learning theory, which says all learning takes place in a context. Anchored instruction then says, well, let's create a context for learning with technology. It's also based on 4 dimensions of what they call effective learning environments. These environments are knowledge-centered, learner-centered, assessment-centered, and community-centered. So knowledge-centered, what does this mean? It means it asks these kind of questions. What is being taught? Why is this being taught? And what does mastery of this subject really look like? The learner-centered questions are, well, what does the learner know coming into the class? What does the learner need to know that they don't already? And what preconceptions does the learner hold? The assessment-centered questions are, how do we know where the learner is on what we consider a learning path, a spectrum of knowledge? Are they a beginner? Are they moderately skilled? Or are they very skilled? And how do you monitor the learner's progress from point to point? Community-centered questions then ask, how do you connect learning experiences to the outside world? It's no use having a learning experience if it doesn't transfer outside of the classroom. And how do we establish collaboration among the learners to foster problem-solving skills? Problem-solving and critical thinking are 2 of the biggest points of anchored instruction. So in pursuit of the answer to these questions, the CTGV developed what is known as the Jasper series, The Adventures of Jasper Woodbury. It's a series of 12 interactive video disc anchors, each telling a story that supports curriculum for a certain middle school math concept. A Rescue at Boone's Meadow was a story about a camper who found a wounded bald eagle and called a friend who flew planes, and the students had to figure out how much fuel could the plane carry and how fast could it travel given headwind or tailwind in order to rescue this bald eagle on time. These types of anchored teaching curriculum supports are not just in elementary school, though. I found another example called CTEL. It was a Case Technologies to Enhance Literacy Learning. This was a nationwide project to help pre-service and in-service teachers understand and more frequently use literacy-related teaching strategies for K through 3rd grade. The example there was that students, most likely, but sometimes in-service teachers, would be gathered into groups and they would watch videos and look through documents and be able to work out what kinds of teaching strategies work best in a given situation. My problem came when I was looking at the questions of impact. What impact does anchored instruction have? It appears to have had very little in the US, maybe a little bit more in Asia. Most of the examples and the resources I was able to find were not in English, to be honest. I've found some articles about Taiwan and China and Turkey using anchored instruction, but not very much in the US, and very little past 2008. One of the resources I found was actually written by former members of the CTGV, and they were talking about how it had evolved to different models, but I wasn't able to find a lot on those either. The same problem came around when I was looking at implications. If it's not being used, it doesn't really have much by way of implications, but I thought that was a pity because it has an emphasis on real-world context, on problem solving and critical thinking, and this works really well, especially since I'm interested in workplace training. This would be a really good fit. And with the advances that we've seen in technology, especially AR and VR, there's all sorts of new opportunities to create really immersive anchor materials. In short, I would say it's very well suited to mesh with meaningful learning because it deliberately places learning in a context that can become transferable. It makes knowledge usable rather than leaving it inert. Where is it going? I have no idea. Apparently, directionally, it's going east. But I think that anchored instruction really merits another look, especially, as I've mentioned, with new technologies making so many new opportunities to create interactive learning experiences that really anchor learning in reality.